The princess is here.
So we'll be spending most of our time down there today. As we go through the cave, I'll talk a little bit about the history, geology, and biology of our cave. Just a couple more things to go over before we do go down to our second level. And the first is that we do have intercoms throughout the cave, so if anybody for any reason needs to go back up to the surface before the tour is over, please let me know. I'll call out for somebody to come down and escort you out, because we don't want you trying to find your way out of the cave on your own. Additionally, there will be times where I'll need to stay behind the group to turn off lights as we leave and enter the next room. So in those instances, I'm going to ask somebody to volunteer to lead us into the next area. We do have bats that are down here in our cave, and when I was down on my last tour, there were a few flying around. So if we do happen to encounter flying bats today, I just want to make sure that we're all staying calm, just stand still, don't scream. They are more afraid of us than we are of them, so we just want to be respectful of them because this is their home down here. Do you guys have any questions for me before we continue down to our second level? Alright, well now is one of those times where I do need a volunteer to lead us down, if anybody wants to. Down this ramp here, you're going to come around and out into this room right here where my light is shining, and I'll be right behind you guys to carry on. Brothers by the names of William and George the Knox. They were about 14 and 16 years old at the time, and they were just playing around in the fields up above. They saw a small animal, like something like a rabbit, run into a hole in the ground. They wanted to try to chase this animal back out of the hole, so they picked up a couple of sticks and started poking around in that hole, hoping to scare it out. The animal never did come out, though, and they eventually got bored and they just let go of their sticks in that hole. But when they did this, they heard their sticks fall really, really deep down into the earth. This is when they realized it's not an average animal hole. There's something a little different about this one. So they came back the very next day with a really long rope and some kerosene lanterns to figure out what was down in this hole. They tied one end of that rope to a tree up on the surface and the other end around their waist. And they slowly lowered themselves down into the hole. And they lower themselves down this surface up here. We call this our slide, and this slide goes all the way down underneath all of our stairs and ramps here, down to our third level. Now, at that time, the boys didn't know this third level existed. It had been filled in with mud, rock, and other debris that was washed in by the glaciers when they were melting several thousand years ago. We'll talk a little bit more about that mud and our third level when we do get down there. But first I want to talk about the rocks and the geology around us. If we look around this room, we're surrounded by all of this tan-colored rock. This is a type of rock called dolostone, and all of this was deposited about 485 million years ago. During this time, there was a warm, shallow sea that covered much of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and when the animals in this sea would pass away, they would sink down to the bottom, and their shells would mix in with the mud and the sediment down there and slowly pile up. And layer after layer of shells, they begin getting crushed and compressed together, and over time solidified the mud down there and turned into all of the stone that we have around us here today. If we look way up here, we have this reddish-orange, rusty-colored material. Does anybody want to take a guess as to what this might be?
Copper? No.
Not copper, but it is a metal.
Some kind of ore? Iron ore.
It's iron ore, yeah.
I drew a blank one.
Back in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, there was a really big iron mining industry in the town of Spring Valley, Wisconsin, which is just about a mile east of here. And they chose not to take the iron deposits out of our cave for two particular reasons. The first being that this chunk right up here is the largest deposit that we have down here within our cave. It wouldn't have really been worth their time or money to bring all their equipment out here and try to dig that out. They probably wouldn't have profited very much, if at all. The second reason being is if you guys kind of take a look at where that's located, it is on the ceiling of our cave. What do you guys think would happen if they drilled that out?
It'd fall out on them.
Yeah, they realized that wouldn't be the safest place to start excavating, so they left that there for that reason as well. And if we can come a little closer to this way, I think we're going to go through really shortly. We haven't turned our lights back on yet, but soon enough. If we look to the right of that iron deposit, we have this whitish, greenish material. And this is a clay called illite. Illite is a really sticky clay. If we were to go up there and stick our fingers in it, and stick them together, they'd stick together like glue. So we don't really use illite for anything in today's society, but clays very similar to this are often used in makeups to help it stick to our faces. It's used in paints to help it stick to the surface that we're painting, and it's also used to make magazine covers to have that really shiny and glossy finish that they have. Now this is called Crystal Cave, so you guys probably do expect to see some crystals down here. We do have several crystals throughout our cave, and they're mostly found within small pockets of our cave walls. But if I shine my light on these two rocks right here, these were brought up from our third level, and they are filled in with these druzy quartz crystals. Druzy just means that they're really tiny crystals. So these two rocks are fairly unusual because they are quite large and not within small pockets. But if I were to shine my light along the cave wall here, we do have some pockets, like right around there, that's filled in with little tiny crystals. And there's several more. Can you please not touch the rocks?
Remember, that's rule number 1.
Right over here, we have another little string of pockets of crystals. So these are all the crystals that we have down here in Crystal Cave. It just looks like somebody came down here and threw glitter at all of the rocks. So these are the crystals that Crystal Cave is named for. Now I do have one more type of rock to point out in this room before we move on, and that is this gray material right here. This is a material that when if it breaks off into pretty sharp pieces. So Native Americans often use this to make arrowheads or spearheads. Additionally, if you take two pieces of this rock and strike it together, it'll create a spark to make fires. Anybody know what this one is?
Flint.
Yep, this is flint. All right, we have this other group that's going to be coming up behind us here, and we're going to go back up to our first level. So we're going to scoot in a little this way. Oh, actually.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we've been down here for 2 weeks. We're so hungry.
All right, there's still another group in the wish room.
What?
Yeah, so we're going to have a little
What are
traffic
they
jam
doing in
here.
there?
I don't know, they're still in there though. They haven't come back out yet.
All right, so my group on the ramp, we're just gonna hang out here for a minute. Because we've got Shelby's group coming up this way. This is a trifecta of traffic jam. This is what we call a cave jam.
We need to go down.
So my group, we're gonna head back.
So they're
around
going up,
here.
you're going down, we're going sort of cattywampusly that way.
All right, so Shelby's here, group 5. Follow me back with the ramp here to the first level.
Okay, traffic
While we are waiting for these other groups to go by, I can point out this over here. This is our picture of good fortune, and local legend has it that if you walk around this pillar once, and only once within a 24-hour period, you'll have the best luck ever for the next 24 hours. However, if you walk around it more than once, you will have as many days bad luck as times you walk around it. So if you walk around it like 3 times, you will have 3 days of the worst luck ever. So if you guys want 24 hours of good luck, feel free to take a walk around that pillar. Otherwise, we can head down this ramp as soon as that group is gone, so we can start lining up over here and begin heading down our ramp this way to go to our 3rd level. We're going to come down this way on this side. You don't want to go and follow that group. It'll be a really, really short tour if you do. As we're coming down this ramp, there are some steps that I'd like to point out. That first one is right here, so just make sure you're watching your step as we come down. There's one more step right here. Alright, so as you guys are kind of coming down this ramp, if we look back up behind us, we can see another angle of that slide the Vanoss brothers came down. So they came all the way down to about where this rock wall is. Now this rock wall illustrates about how deep the mud was in this third level. So if you trace the top of it over, you can kind of see why they didn't know this third level had existed down here. The water that we have trickling down the slide right there is actually artificially brought in to illustrate what the cave would have looked and sounded like when the glaciers were melting, bringing in all of that mud down here. We don't have any natural water flowing through our cave. Our water table is much too low for that. But most caves do have natural lakes or rivers forming within them or flowing through them. So it kind of illustrates what other caves would look and sound like as well. Now as we go through this third level, we do have quite a few low-hanging rocks. So if you're on the taller side, you want to watch your head quite a bit. The first one worth mentioning is this one right here. And this one has been appropriately named Headache Rock. As you can imagine, if you hit your head on it, it's going to hurt quite a bit and you might be left with a headache. If you are any taller than I am, I would strongly recommend ducking as we walk around Headache Rock here.
You don't have to.
Great, and we are going to keep going into this next room right here, but please stay on this side of that fence. How caves do form. When it rains up on the surface, that rainwater will trickle down through the soil and pick up carbon dioxide. This will turn it into carbonic acid, which is a fairly weak acid, but when it reaches the bedrock and it finds a crack or a joint that it can seep into, it'll trickle down along that crack and slowly dissolve away the minerals in the rock, making that crack wider and wider as it goes down. Over several thousand or million years, these cracks will get as wide as the rooms that we have down here in this cave. So it takes a very long time for caves to form like this, but a couple million years ago, before this cave began forming, all of this open space that we see that we're standing in was once solid rock. Geologists have been able to link up the formation of this cave with events that have been observed along the Mississippi River, so we do believe that this cave began forming between 1 million and 1.5 million years ago. That does make it a fairly young cave as far as geological terms go, but we know that our cave is still actively forming. We still have that carbonic acid trickling down through our ceilings. If you look at this surface right here, it is incredibly wet and drippy. And this is all of that water and carbonic acid that's still actively seeping through and forming our cave. If you do happen to get dripped on today, it's completely harmless. It's considered good luck, and we like to call it a cave kiss. It just means the cave really likes you. Did you guys have any questions about any of that before we head into our next room here? Alright, well, you guys can come around this fence. Now, this room here is called the ballroom, and it's the largest room that we have down here inside of our cave. We've had 2 weddings in this room. The first one in 1942, that year that the cave first opened, and the second one was in 1991. That second couple, they were a pair of geologists, so this is a fairly appropriate place for them to want to hold their wedding. But they stood over on this side underneath this archway, and they tied the knot right underneath there. They were able to seat 85 guests in this room where we're standing in folding chairs. And over on this side, they had a string quartet playing rock music for their ceremony. We have some bats that are talking to us over in that corner too, so we'll try to stay a little quieter for them. But we do have bats that come into this place for the winter that hibernate. We have the northern long-eared bats, the little brown bats, the tricolored bats, and the big brown bats. The little brown bats are the most common bats that we have down here within our cave. And a lot of them do prefer to hibernate in this room, and some of them are already hanging out. And I can point a few of those out before we leave this room, but there's probably a little brown bat over there that's kind of squeaking at us. They're really social, so when they come down to hibernate, they like to sleep next to all their friends and families, and they kind of snuggle together to keep each other warm throughout the winter. The tricolored bat is the second most common bat we have down here within our cave, and they're also Wisconsin's smallest bats. They're probably only about this big when they're fully grown, so the bats are really, really tiny. They're more independent. They don't really hang out with their friends and families when they come down here, so they'll just hang out by themselves. But when they come back to the cave, they come back to the exact same spot in the cave every single year, so we can get to know our tricolored bats fairly well. They're a little possessive of where they sleep. And the northern long-eared bats, we don't really see down here in our cave too horribly often. But this is because when they come down to hibernate, they'll crawl into some nooks and crannies, where it's a little harder to see them. If we just do a quick walk through the cave to observe how many bats we have, we kind of miss all of our northern long-eared bats because we have to look in all the little tiny crevices to find them. And then we have our big brown bats. We also don't really see those in our cave either, but this is because it's not cold enough down here for them. They prefer cooler temperatures when they want to hibernate, so they stay upstairs and they hibernate between the walls in the attic of our gift shop during the winter. So they're at Crystal Cave, they're just not inside of the cave, they're kind of shopping in their sleep. Now during the summer, most of the bats prefer to stay outside and they won't come back to the cave until fall. They stay outside to be closer to their food source, which are insects. A single bat can eat up to 3,000 insects per night. When they're out and about, they're trying to get as fat as they can to hibernation. They want to have as much fat stored up so they can make it through the winter without eating. And their heart rate while they're out and about is about 200 beats per minute. When they come back into the cave for the winter, they slow all of their vitals down. They drop their heart rate from about 200 beats per minute to 12 beats per minute. They'll take one breath every 3 to 5 minutes, and they'll lower their body temperature to about that of our cave. Now in the springtime, the female bats will have one single baby called a pup, and as bats are mammals, she will keep that pup with her and care for it and raise it until it's old enough to fly around and catch its own food all by itself. Now, I know at least one of our little mini groups knows about white nose syndrome, but that's a fungus that was discovered in 2006 in New York State, and it's been slowly moving further westward throughout the United States and Canada. It only grows at temperatures lower than 67 degrees, so it does begin growing on bats while they're hibernating because they drop their body temperatures. This will cause them to wake up a lot during the winter because it just makes them really, really itchy. So they'll wake up multiple times to scratch themselves, and the more they come out of that deep hibernation sleep, the more energy they use up, and eventually they have to leave the cave too early to find more food. When they do this, there's no insects flying around in winter, so they'll go outside and they'll starve to death. For the little brown bats, because they're pretty social, it spreads through them really quickly, and they have a mortality rate of about 90%. For some of the less social bats, like the tricolored bats, it's only about 70%. So it just matters how fast it spreads through them, but there's no known cure for it, so when it does come into a cave, there's not a whole lot we can do to try to prevent it spreading to other bats and wiping out our populations. But as you guys can imagine, if a single bat will eat 3,000 insects per night, over the course of the summer, an entire bat population, that's a lot of insects we have if the bats are missing. So they're really important to us because of that. But, did you guys have any questions about the bats or white nose or anything like that before we go into our next one?
See some here?
There's one right there. There's one over here. There's another one over here, and another one over there. And I think there's two of them cuddled up right there. There was another one over on this wall yesterday. I'm not sure if it's still there. And then there's also two of them right over here where we're going to walk through. tiny. This is actually big as a long-eared
Does the
rat.
temperature in this cave change?
Nope, it stays the same
That's
all
what I
year.
know.
Try and sneak past you guys so we can open up this gate that's up here. Alright, so you guys can keep going down this little hallway here. You're gonna come out into another room down there. It might be a little dark. It's gonna be right there. Great. Well, as we came into this room here, we came up this ramp right here. This part down here at the bottom of the ramp is the deepest part of our cave, and it's about 72 feet below the surface. So where we're standing, we're about 7 stories or 7 basements deep. It's kind of cool to think about. Now this room is called Mary's Maze. It's named for Mary Freedy, one of the original owners of our cave, and she's also the woman who discovered this room. Before 1957, all of the tours would go to where that gate was that we walked through, and then they'd go over to that next room where that other group was, and then they'd go around and back out. They didn't know these rooms existed. Mary was giving a routine tour through the rest of the cave at that time, and when she got to where that gate was, she felt a breeze across the back of her neck. She knew that this meant that there was another opening somewhere inside of the cave. So when she was finished with her tour, she came back to try to figure out where that breeze was coming from. She ended up following it and crawling through a small hole, probably about the size of this hole up here behind our light, to come out into this room here. So she was a really tiny and really brave woman.
I would say.
All of these rooms were still filled in with mud in 1957, so they dug all of that out, and they didn't do the best job. If you look around, there's still mud all over a lot of the walls, and like over on this rock wall. Yeah, we did that fly by. But they added these onto the tours in 1957. There has been another major discovery also visible in this room in 1991, and that was this cave right over here. It's known as our Bat Cave. It gets the name because at the very end of this, there is another opening to the surface that the bats frequently use to get inside of our cave. So we'll often see them flying in and out of this passageway. When this was discovered, it added an additional 2,500 feet to the length of our cave, which is what made Crystal Cave Wisconsin's longest cave at just under a mile long total. We do not take our tours through the Bat Cave, though, for 2 particular reasons. The first being that if you guys look at the ground right down there, it's really wet and really muddy. Most people don't really want to walk through that. The second reason being that as this passageway continues on, it starts to get really, really narrow, to the point where you're not actually walking through that mud. You're crawling through it and dragging yourself through on your belly. You have to crawl through it for about 2 to 2.5 hours before you got to the other side. So it's quite a bit of crawling. I don't know if my light did turn on in here. Nope. Okay. Well, one of my lights burned out, I guess. So there's supposed to be a light on right here to point out all of these stereothems. All of these stereothems, or cave formations, are formed as that carbonic acid trickles through the rocks and picks up the mineral calcite. When it reaches an open space, it'll drip down and deposit some of that calcite on the ceiling and the rest of it down on the ground where it splashes. Right here we have stalactites and stalagmites. Does anybody know the difference between the two?
One's from the ceiling, one's from the
Do you know which is which?
I don't remember.
The stalactites are the ones that come down from the ceiling, and we can remember these because they need to hang on tight. The stalagmites are the ones that grow up, and they might grow up or we might accidentally step on them. So that's how we can remember the difference easily. These do grow really slowly. It's a drop-by-drop process, so it'll take about 100 years for them to grow an inch long. If we touch these, the oils on our skin will rub off and act as a water repellent and prevent that calcite from sticking and depositing for a really, really long time. So we want to try to keep these growing for future generations to enjoy as well. But I have one more speleothem in this room that I can point out on this wall right here. And this one is called flowstone because it's flowing down the side of the rock instead of dripping down from the ceiling.
It's like frosting.
Kind of. A lot of people tell me it looks like brains or boogers or something like that, but it's solid rock. Over time, a lot of these will look like really nice waterfalls, frozen waterfalls. The one that you guys were kind of stopping and looking at in the hallway was another good example of flowstone, but we'll have to go back down there later so you can get another chance to see it if you hadn't already. But we can continue on into our next room this way. There's more examples of flowstone, as well as columns or pillars, which are when a stalactite and stalagmite grow together. As you guys walk down this hallway, you can look to either side. It's a really good display with that. Great, so this room is called the refrigerator room. Do you guys feel any colder in this room than in the last room? Well, it should be the same temperature. We might feel colder because we've been down here for almost half an hour, so our bodies are starting to adjust to the cooler temperatures as opposed to upstairs. But this is also a dead end, and it's a really narrow hallway, so any breeze coming in kind of has to come in and flow around, and that might cool us off as well. But we chose the name refrigerator room because the cave thinks it's cold. It has goosebumps. So if you look up at the ceiling, it does look like it has goosebumps up here. And these are just little baby stalactites beginning to form. But our cave is about 50 degrees year-round, all throughout the length of our cave. That's the average annual temperature for this area. So whether it's 100 degrees in the summer or 20 below in the winter, it's always 50 down here. If we were to go somewhere where their average temperatures are warmer further south than Kentucky, their caves are about 60 degrees year-round. Caves in Texas and Arizona are about 70 degrees. So if you have a warmer environment, the caves there are warmer as well. I did mention in our previous room, we're about 70 feet below the surface. Would you guys want to be down here if there was a tornado? Yeah. I had a couple yeahs. That is correct. This is a really safe place to be during a tornado. If there was one occurring on the surface, we'd have no idea. We wouldn't be able to hear it or feel it. The only potential indication we would have while down here is that the power would be knocked out and we'd be left in total darkness. But I have a flashlight just in case something like that does happen. Otherwise, the only way you'd find out is when we went back up to the surface and found out that our gift shop had been destroyed or your cars might have been picked up from the parking lot and dropped somewhere else. So, really safe down here. So if there's ever severe weather, you can come over to Crystal Cave and you'll be safe down here. As I mentioned, this room is a dead end, so we have to go back down through this little hallway and back into Mary's maze to get back to our next room. another really nice glowstone, and right here where this light is shining, so you can take a look at that as we walk by. We're going to keep going into this room right over here. Ghost room. We don't have any hauntings here. There's no real ghosts in Crystal Cave, but we have a friendly face on our cave wall. So you guys want to look right over here where my light is shining. Right here where I'm pointing. You can see he's got two eyes and a mouth, and he kind of looks like he's saying boo. When Mary and Henry first came down into our cave and saw this face on the wall, they thought he was kind of cool. So they took a black and white photo of him and put him on a postcard. And they sent this postcard all across the country as an original way to advertise for Crystal Cave. So when the cave first opened in 1942, this room was our main attraction. Everybody came down to the ghost room to visit the ghost of Crystal Cave. We have been down here for a little bit over half an hour now, and I haven't yet told you guys what it means for a cave to be called a cave. There's three main requirements in order for a cave to be considered a true cave. The first being that it must be naturally forming. We cannot go dig a hole in our backyard and say that we discovered a cave. The second is that it must be large enough to fit or accommodate people inside of it. We're all standing here pretty comfortably. This one's quite spacious, but even if we were crawling through the small passageways of the bat cave, we do fit through it, so it is still considered a cave. And the last requirement is that we must be able to experience absolute darkness. Do you guys want to see if we can do that here today?
Sure.
Sure. Turn on your light. Yeah, you guys are going to turn off your flashlights. If you guys want to grab onto a buddy, if you might be a little afraid of the dark, that's totally fine. No. I'm going to ask you guys to kind of glue your shoes to the floor. I don't want anybody shuffling around when the lights are off. And then I ask you guys to be really quiet. I don't want anybody like freaking out or screaming while the lights are off. I'll have my hand on my flashlight at all times, so if anybody does want me to turn the lights back on, just let me know. But I'm going to walk over here to where my light switch is. Or if you guys want to follow me back down this little passageway, we'll head on into our next room. As we go through this next little hallway, some of these rocks are quite low, so just make sure you're watching where you're walking, and if you're taller, make sure you're ducking.
Don't touch.
We do have some bats that are sleeping up here as well. Just get one. Open the door.
You smack yourself.
That's real. So this is our fossil room. When we were up on the second level, I told you guys that all of this dolostone around us was formed about 485 million years ago when there was a warm, shallow sea that covered Minnesota and Wisconsin. This illustration kind of depicts what life might have been like or looked like in that warm, shallow sea. This is during a time period known as the Ordovician time period, and this is about 200 million years before the dinosaurs came around, so this is a really long time ago. Now, at that time, this creature right here, known as a cephalopod, was the largest animal that existed and floated around in the seas. Cephala means head and pod means foot because the feet or the tentacles are kind of growing out of its head. These are really closely related to our modern day squids and octopi and other animals like that. But this one had a really long shell. It only lived in this outer part of the shell right here, so as the animal would grow, it would have to add on another section of the shell so that it would fit inside of it. The shell itself could grow to be up to 15 feet long, so they were pretty big. We do have a piece of a shell here that I can point out to you guys, and that is right here. This shell, when fully intact, would have been about 12 feet long. And to kind of put that into perspective for you guys, it's about the length of this railing if it were stretched out straight. It's a really big animal. I would not want to go swimming with one of these. The next fossil that I can point out to you guys is the gastropod. Gastro means stomach, so the name means stomach foot. The stomach region of the animal was within the foot part of its body, but these are really closely related to our modern day snails. You can see them in the illustration here. They're just kind of cruising along the bottom of the seafloor like snails still do today. They have the same coiled shells that we're used to seeing in our modern day snails, and we also have a gastropod fossil in our floor. So if we look right over here, we can see the coiled snail-like shell down there in our floor. I don't know if it's better or worse with my flashlight on it. Sometimes it washes it out a little bit too much. But we do have those throughout our cave. That's the easiest one to point out because it's pretty clear and the perfect angle to look at it. But there's several more if you look hard enough. The next fossil that I'll tell you guys about are the crinoids. They're all of these weird little flowery looking things in the background. But despite looking like plants, they're actually animals. They did have this very long stem here. But the stem was made up of little discs that kind of acted like vertebrae, but they're not vertebrae. When the animal would pass away, all of these discs would break apart from each other and get scattered all across the seafloor. We often find these preserved in our rocks, and they look a lot like dried up SpaghettiOs or Cheerios or just little tiny rings. So if you guys want to look at this rock right here, you can see all the little pieces of the crinoid. And then this part right here next to my thumb is part of a stem that hadn't fully fallen apart, so sometimes we do find them intact. These little discs weather out of the rocks fairly easily, so Native Americans often use them for beads to make jewelry because they are hollow in the center. The last fossil to talk about is the trilobite. The trilobite was named for its 3 lobes or parts, which are the head, the thorax or the middle part, and the tail. Trilobites are the most commonly found fossils from the Ordovician time period, and they're also Wisconsin's state fossil. So anywhere within the state of Wisconsin where you have limestone or dolostone of Ordovician age, you can find trilobites within those rocks. The ones that we have in this area are fairly small. They're probably only about the size of your fingernail. But in other parts of the world, trilobites have been found up to 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. So they did get quite large. I have this little guy here, who is certainly not from our area, but he's a really good example of a trilobite to show you guys, so you have an idea of what they did look like while they were alive. Trilobites had the first known compound eyes, which are the same kind of eyes our modern-day flies and other insects have. So they're thought to have had the most advanced eyesight of their time. Did you guys have any questions about the trilobites or any of the other fossils in here before we move on? Alright, well we can head on down this next hallway here. If I remember correctly, there are a couple bats sleeping in this hallway as we go down, so if I can find those, I'll point those out as we go. That first one is right here. Please do not touch the bat. There's another one right here. It's the last place that we do have some really cool speleothems for you guys to take pictures of. We do have to keep moving on, so if you guys want to just take a quick picture, we can continue on down this next hallway. As we go into this next room, there are, again, some little hanging rocks, so just make sure you're watching your head and duck it as we go along. All of this was deposited about 485 million years ago. During this time, there was a warm, shallow sea that covered much of Minnesota and Wisconsin. And it's not copper, but it is a metal.
Or iron ore.
It's iron ore.
I like
Yeah.
that. Drew was like,
Gears in it. And stick them together. They'd stick together like glue. So we don't really use it like for anything in today's society. Pockets, but if I were to shine my light along the cave wall here, we do have some pockets, like right around there, that's filled in with little tiny crystals. And there's some more. Can you please not touch the rocks? Walk around it more than once. You will have as many days back as times you walk around it. So the exact same spot in the cave every single year, so we can get to know our tricolor bats fairly well. They're a little possessive of where they stay. And the northern long-eared bats, we don't really see down here in our cave too horribly often, but this is because when they come down to hibernate. Now during the summer, most of the bats prefer to stay outside, and they won't come back to the cave until fall. They stay outside to be closer to their food source, which are insects. A single bat can eat up to 3,000 insects per night. When they're out and about, they're trying to get as fat as they can to prepare for the winter hibernation. Come on, guys. Cooler in the dark. You guys ready? Okay. Alright, so flick this off. This first one right here is quartz. Quartz is what all of the crystals in Crystal Cave are made out of, as well as Charlie's teeth in that last room. With that, we have some hydrozincite and willemite. And these Charlie and his friends used to come down here and they'd race their boats through the water that was flowing through the cave at the time. Charlie was not a very good racer. He always came in last place. He was always trying to find new ways to make his boat faster so he could maybe finally win the race. One day, Charlie came up with a really good invention to make his boat go really fast. However, it made his boat a little bit too fast. When Charlie came around that corner into this room here, he lost control of his boat and he crashed into the wall, creating this hole right here. Now we can still find pieces of Charlie and his boat in this room. So if we look way in the back over here, this is Charlie's invention, which was our first outboard boat motor. If you look down at the bottom here, the propeller did break off. So we have found that the propeller went through and made the hole in the wall right here. And as for Charlie, Charlie is still in our room as well. So if you guys take a look at the rock right here, we can see Charlie's face. We can see his two eyes, his nose, and his mouth. So this is Charlie. Now if you guys look carefully, you can see that Charlie doesn't really have any teeth in his mouth anymore. He crashed so hard, all of his teeth came out. And they came over to this side. So right here we have the teeth of our caveman Charlie. They've been down here for so long that they've recrystallized into quartz crystals. Now when Charlie came into this room on his boat, he realized he was losing control and he did try to stop himself. So he grabbed onto the rock right here. So these are Charlie's fingerprints. Now, we had mentioned up above, before we came down into our cave, that if we touch the rock walls, they will turn black from the oils on our skins. This is a pretty good example of that. And in honor of poor Charlie, they never did have the races through this cave again. Now, we do have one last room to visit on our tour today. Before we head back up to the second level to get to that room, just a couple of things to go over. The first is that we cannot take anything out of this room as much as you may want to, and we also cannot leave anything behind in this room. It'll make more sense when we get up there. But also, as we go into this last room, there is a really, really low-hanging rock, and I think all of us will need to duck underneath it to get into this last room. But if we can all come out into this open space here, so I can turn that light off. We kind of want to spread out so we can get everybody out of there. We're going to stay right here for now. I'm going to keep coming in here. Alright, I think we're all in here now. I'm going to turn that off. Before we head up these stairs, I just want to point out that this right here is Headache Rock from the other side. So again, as we walk by Headache Rock here, make sure you're ducking if you're tall enough to hit your head on it, because we don't want any of these leaving the tour with a headache today.
I was gonna count the steps going up or down, do you know how many there are?
I had a tour earlier this week or late last week, and there was a set on it where we counted all the steps. I want to say it was either 46 or 43. It was a lot less than I would have expected, but most of the up and down is up and down. And that was including all of the steps coming down the road. Can go on ahead of me and into this room up here. Again, watch your head on that rock because it is really low. It's about 2 feet wide, so don't stand up too quickly either. So this is our wish room. When the cave first opened in 1942, visitors would come down here and place a coin within the wall and make a wish. It was said that if the coin stayed stuck in the wall, the wish would come true. We've since realized this isn't the best thing to be doing to our cave, so we do no longer allow this. But we believe that there's enough magic on all the coins around us that if you do still want to make a wish in the wish room, feel free. You just need to close your eyes and say your wish to yourself. Don't say it out loud or tell anybody, because it won't come true that way. But wishes still should come true in this room. All the damage from these coins has been done to these walls, so we would only further damage the cave by trying to remove them all. So we leave them here for you guys to enjoy for years to come. But the main attraction of this room now is these rocks on these boards here behind me. All of these rocks have a property which will cause them to fluoresce or glow under a black light. So I'm going to turn off this big light, so it's going to get pretty dark in here. But I'll have my black light on, so it won't be entirely dark. And these rocks are going to look much cooler in the dark. Are you guys ready? Yeah. All right. Flip this off. This first one right here is quartz. Quartz is what all of the crystals in Crystal Cave are made out of, as well as Charlie's teeth in that last room. Next to that, we have some hydrozincite and willemite, and these are just ores of the mineral zinc. Up here we have opalite, which is really similar to opal, the birthstone of the month October. Next to that is warnerite, and warnerite is used in making jewelry. And then we have several pieces of calcite. Calcite is what all of our speleothems or cave formations are made out of. And then we have fluorite. Fluorite is used to get fluoride, and we put that in mouthwash and toothpaste, and it helps keep our teeth nice and strong.
Ooh, just don't smile in a black light.
After that, we have this piece of slag. Slag is a man-made byproduct from making steel, so it does not form naturally, but it still has a nice glow to it. And this last one down here is halite. Halite is something that we eat every single day, and to give you guys a hint, it's something that we sprinkle on our french fries.
Salt.
Yep, halite is salt. We keep this one in a plastic bag because it's so humid down here. If we left it out in the open, it would dissolve away in about a week, so we'd have to keep replacing it. We have this one way over here called franklinite. This is a really rare mineral. It's only found in one place in the world, and that is Franklin, New Jersey, which is where it gets the name franklinite. They were nice enough to send us over a piece of it so we can show you what it looks like under our black light here. But I'm going to come all the way back over here to the calcite. Calcite has an additional property which will cause it to phosphoresce or continue glowing if we take the light away. You guys want to see what that looks like?
Yeah.
Yeah? Alright, well if I turn this light off and kind of move it out of your way, it holds a slight glow for a couple of seconds and slowly fades away. Now our cave walls also have calcite in them, so if I hold my black light up to the cave wall right here for a little bit and move that away, it'll also glow for a couple of seconds. Not as bright because it's not pure calcite like the one on the board, but it's still pretty cool. I'm going to turn this big light back on, so it's going to get a little bright in here. You guys might want to shield your eyes just in case you're a little more sensitive to that. But this does conclude our tour today. Did you guys have any last questions for me before we head back up? Alright. Abby in the wish room coming up. I do have one last thing to point out for you guys when we get back up to our first level, so we're going to kind of regroup there when we get there. But we can come back around this really low-hanging rock here. We'll go back up some of our ramps and get to our first level. We'll talk a little bit more when we get there. Thank you guys for coming out to Crystal Cave today. I hope you did enjoy the tour. If so, I'd like to encourage you to go onto Yelp or TripAdvisor and leave us a review there. Additionally, there are comment cards available upstairs in the gift shop where you can review anything about myself or any of your other experiences here today. Now, I did say I had one last thing to point out for you guys, so as we go up this last bit of stairs right here, if you guys look to the right over this railing, you can see some natural sunlight shining through. That is the very top of the slide that the Vanoss brothers came down and the original opening to our cave. We do have it mostly boarded up so that nothing larger than our bats can come inside through that opening, but it is still open for our bats and they do use that. around and to the left to exit into our gift shop unless you have things in the lockers.